Welcome to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host, and today we've got a very special guest, Abhijeet Prabhune. And Abhijeet, you are going to talk about something that we really need to think a lot more about in our organizations. How do we grow by doing things better internally, empowering teams internally? And to put an accentuation point on this, I ask every C-suite executive that comes onto this podcast, what are your two greatest challenges to creating long-term sustainable growth? And the overwhelming percentage of them, their answers, their challenges are all internal. We love to point externally, right, when things aren't going right. But we're going to focus in a way that we've never had before in this podcast on what we can do internally. And you've got a great background for this. You've been in the business for over a couple of decades. You started out as an engineer, and now you're in customer success. You're the chief customer success officer at IP Infusion. There's things about your background. You were in Intel, but you told me where you were in Intel, you were still in the David part of Intel fighting the Goliath. And so you've been part of growth strategies your entire career. And you bring a very detailed engineering perspective to it when a lot of it is an art form that you've created here. And so I'm going to let you explain a lot more about that when we get into this here. But you're also a marathon runner. You were a proud first generation immigrant from India into the United States. I would love to hear your version expanded on that of your background before we jump in and talk about how do we scale companies without scaling headcount? How do we do more with less, which is what we all want to do, right?
Sounds great. Thanks, Steve, for the introduction. I appreciate that. The introduction coming from you sounds a little bit more interesting than what I would project myself as. I've been really lucky in that sense to have been able to find industry that I am passionate about, being able to contribute to it so far. So as an engineer in India, I always go back to this story of when I was applying for colleges in US for my master's degree. I used to have a really bad dial-up connection, which would drop the moment I wanted to click submit for my application. That was the moment that I said, hey, there's a better way. There must be a better way of doing this. And I want to be able to contribute to that industry and make connectivity a non-issue for hopefully all of people. I don't think we are there yet. Even today, if you look at programs that governments are running across the globe, be it in US, UK rural programs in United Kingdom, there's still a lot of work that we need to do to make sure that broadband is accessible to everybody. And that's kind of the purpose that drives me on a daily basis. Tremendously, I've been very lucky to be just part of that journey from India to US as an immigrant, and then migrating from, or then making the change from engineering into a customer facing role and being able to grow in that role. What you touched on with Intel story, that's central to what I have come to be in terms of working in small or innovators or challenger companies that are challenging the status quo or challenging Goliaths in different industries, especially related to different aspects of networking. That's how I'm continuing my journey today. At IP Infusion, I lead the pre-sales, post-sales technical, as well as customer success. We are definitely a challenger who is going up against some of the biggest companies and names in the networking software industry.
I want to take all of that experience and start out with, it was a philosophy, I would say, that you had. How do you really take in and you said something called constrained growth reality. Like you live within the reality, and the reality usually is like going to a board meeting and they're usually saying, we expect a lot more. You're going to have to do it without more. In fact, probably with less, right? So you very rarely go into a board meeting and go, and they go, how much more do you want? Because we want to grow. They're like, you got to grow, and you got to grow with what you got or less. So you called it constrained growth reality. Can you tell us a little bit about how do we thrive within that environment? Because we're all there. 99% of us are there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a perspective shift. And I've heard more and more executives starting to talk about this now, especially with the age of AI. But having worked in those challengers or innovators all my life, that has always been the reality in terms of, hey, we need to be able to demonstrate and win in this market segment with the constraints that we given, and have a growth that so that we can reinvest in the business and continue that growth cycle, the virtuous growth cycle, if you will. Right? So that has always been the perspective that I have thrived under. It makes for a fun, it makes for a fun way of looking at things, because in my mind, that attitude of frugality or constraint-based growth is what drives innovation. I'll give a couple of examples here.
Great.
So I always say that the hard part isn't the growth, but how we unlock it from those principles. I think Amazon has these leadership principles of frugality, and I believe that frugality and innovation connect with each other. Sometimes what happens is you have to start looking at it from a system perspective, and by what I mean by that is the organization designed correct? Or do we have the right processes? What else can we do to innovate rather than thinking of the constraints that have been put on us? And that kind of unlocks a different way of thinking for me when I come into a new team.
I love the idea
Customer
that you've got
outcomes.
a perspective that innovation is actually accentuated by constraints. And that's like a really unique way of looking at it. I don't know what else to say. How do these constraints actually unlock innovation?
Yeah, great question. I'll start with some of the results that we have been able to achieve and then talk about some of the examples. So here at IPI in the last 5 years, we've been able to grow from 200 to over 600 customers. We have had a 10x increase in our bookings over the last 5 years, but our SE team, which is the pre-sales team, and the TAC team has grown by less than 10%. There's a couple of things that when I start looking at that, how we were able to achieve that. The first thing always is when you start looking at team constraints, then it's about, okay, we have a fixed amount of time. How do we focus that time on the right metrics and the right work output? I'll give an example. When I had first joined, the SE team was doing a lot of POCs. And the signal from the POCs were we were winning POCs 100% of the time, but we were not able to convert that. So we started looking at that one level deeper. What we figured out is that for that market segment, the best analogy I can give is we were pitching a Ferrari where the market really needed a Corolla. Like everybody loved the Ferrari, but when it comes to the sales aspect of it, it didn't convert. So switching that off, saying, hey, let's not pitch it to this market. This is not what this market segment requires. Let's pivot to a new market segment that immediately converted our POC. Our POC ratio was still 100%, or maybe dropped down a little bit in the new market segment, but our conversion ratio shot up by a lot. And that allowed us to grow our sales in the new market segment and reduce the wasted time for the sales and the SE team in the other market segments. A similar thing was with respect to the TAC team. So when I took over the global customer support team, we started looking at the customer growth. And there it was a system design issue in terms of we were operating in the standard 3-tier model, level 1, level 2, level 3. And for what our customers required, our product life cycle, where we were, that was just a mismatch. And we flattened that out and made each customer support engineer accountable and responsible for end-to-end delivery to the customer. By just doing that, we essentially 3x'd our customer support engineering team and are able to support the same growth from 200 to 600 customers over that period.
So can you repeat
Those
that? What was the additional responsibilities you gave to them again? Can you say that?
What it essentially did, when you have a level 1, level 2, level 3 standard 3-tiered approach, the level 1 customer support engineer picks up the call and then hands it off to the level 2 for the next level of debugging. The level 2 then hands it off to the level 3 for the next level of debugging. So those handoffs, by flattening it out and giving them additional training, so everybody can now operate at a level 2 or a level 3 engineer. It flattened out the mechanism. It reduced the handoffs that were happening. So the customers were much happier in terms of, hey, I don't have to talk to 3 different people. And essentially, it allowed us to scale our customer support without having to scale the team itself.
That's amazing. And everybody needed to have the responsibility, I would assume. They thought about it more holistically as well, rather than just here's a baton. Oh, I reached the point where I normally just dish this off. I have to think about how this all connects together. And so they become more solutions architects in the process.
Absolutely. And in the process, it was a major motivational boost as well for the team, because otherwise the level 1 engineer is always looking up to the level 2 or level 3. Now everyone can achieve that same level of technical depth and aspire to be the same level of customer support engineer without having these different hierarchies that you have to aspire towards.
See, so now I'm starting to get how constraints build innovation. Those people, when you say they're much more motivated, they're motivated to think and innovate and solve the solutions themselves or the problems themselves without giving them more money. You've given them the ability to do more, and they're proud to do it and take on that responsibilities. So it's starting to click. It's starting to click. Another area that you talked about that I want to make sure we have plenty of time to cover, and that's that you talked about that growth depends a lot on organization design internally. Tell us a little bit more about what you mean on that.
Goes back to the one aspect that I talked about, the tag team already, in terms of how the organization design was blocking us from continuing to support our customers in that fashion. But there are other aspects there. How do we align our customer requirements all the way and make the voice of customer visible across the organization? When we started this about 5 years ago, we started a program where the SC team or the sales engineers would be able to create a structured requirement for each customer conversation that they had, which where they found something that customers required. From that, we created a voice of customer program along with the PLM team, and that then led into engineering and much faster product planning cycles. The other thing that we did, we understood that we were taking a long time for onboarding new customers. Our average customer onboarding time was 6 to 9 months. Then we said, okay, how do we design our organization to reduce that to 3 months? We were able to do that by creating very strategic handoff mechanisms between the pre-sales and post-sales, by creating bridge roles for customer success managers. So that's how the customer success management team was born actually at IPI, to focus specifically on this aspect of, let's focus on the customer onboarding problem and the customer adoption problem, solve that, and then we'll go from there. Glad to say that we've been able to achieve that. My goal is 6 weeks. There are certain supply chain problems that we need to solve to be able to achieve that, but I think that has been rewarding as well.
What's one of the big things I just took away from that is you're solve for customer outcomes first. Because any of us, if anybody asked us to put together an org, a team, organization, internal structures, we could do it. We're C-suite executives. We got the smarts. But if you say, hang on a second, put together this kind of a customer outcome and then back into the organization structure that supports that. That's a very different perspective on coming on this, but so profound and so different. You guys are a living proof of that, a 9 months to a 3 month, 10xing the amount of customers that you're serving with less than a 10% increase in the organization that serves them. It's a phenomenal success. One of the number one question on or when I ask for what are your top 2 challenges for creating long-term sustainable growth is internal alignment. I understand the structures, but how do you get teams aligned? Like, how do you get them working together?
That's a really good question. Let me think about that for a second. And the reason I have to think about it is because it's become second nature now. I have to go back to the point where that was not a second nature, and what could we do differently? From my perspective, when I think about alignment, it starts with what you mentioned, which is that goal or outcome. Like, what is the customer outcome that we want to create? Then from that, what is the process that best gets us to that particular outcome? I think it's just talking with folks and talking with your peers to be able to align everybody in that mechanism. I think the tools you use for that alignment can change from time to time. In some cases, it might be a formal process that runs through Salesforce to Google Sheets to Jira. In other cases, it might be a weekly meeting. In other cases, it might be a daily stand up. So the tool that you use for that internal alignment might change from time to time, but the standard, but how you get to that alignment, that process, I think, has stayed same for me, at least in terms of starting with the end in mind and then solving it one step at a time, moving backwards from that.
I was just interviewing a 4-time B2B CRO. He was answering a very similar question. And he said, there's a lot of different layers to that. He said, but one of the most important things too is the culture of the company. And he said, you got to have a culture where there's no egos, there's no assholes, like we're all on the same team. Like he was that direct, and that we're all shared in the success. And it's not a finger pointing, they didn't do this, and so we couldn't do that. We all take responsibilities. We're all serving the same customer, which is really what you're saying is focus on the customer. There's one highest authority in every business. It's the customer. So I loved it. Like a few minutes ago, you were talking about, I think you used the words operationalizing voice of the customer. McKinsey did a study 3 years ago, and they found out that less than 15% of companies actually execute well on a voice of the customer program. Less than 15%. Yet you're saying it's the number one thing. It's that outcome for that customer.
That customer,
So,
yeah.
like when you said, if I'm not paraphrasing you right, operationalizing the voice of the customer, what did you mean by that?
Yeah, we talked about the feedback cycle for the product planning cycle, but there are a couple of other tweaks that we have done. The other thing, before I jump into that, though, I'll come back to the culture aspect that you touched upon, Steve, and I'll add one layer of that to the culture. It's not just the aspect of, hey, let's be frank with each other and say what we need from each other, but there needs to be an element of being allowed to fail. The individual contributor knowing that if they make a mistake, the management has their back. We're going to train them. If it's a process issue, we're going to create a new process around it. If it's a training issue for that person, we're going to fix that and train the person and allow the person to operate with that. You cannot give somebody accountability without the responsibility, and you cannot give them a responsibility without the freedom to operate. So all three of those have to be aligned. Give them the freedom to operate, freedom to make a mistake, come back and say, hey, you made a mistake, let's course correct here. Then you say, okay, I've given you the freedom to operate. Here's the responsibility that goes along with that. And here's how I'm going to measure and hold you accountable. So if that whole aspect is clear, that whole thread is clear, then it becomes easy for the person to operate. And that's when you start scaling. Because otherwise, what I see a lot is managers trying to control things very tightly because they haven't put that full thread together. And my aspect always is to come and make sure the expectations are clear, the operational guidelines are clear, and I'm there to support them if they need anything from me. That aspect of, yeah, I'm here to back you up, I'm here to support you as an executive, that becomes very important.
You said something at the beginning of that too, which was like, you got to feel like whoever you report to, they have your back and you're given the freedom to make choices and even make mistakes. I heard somebody call it the emotional security to do what you need to do. Like, no, don't have a fear of failure. Failure is a part of trying something new and different and innovating. There should be an expected, you're not going to bat 1,000. In Major League Baseball, United States, right? The best hitters are like 400, the best. That means they strike out 6 out of 10 times they get to the plate. So I love that you added that in.
What we did was that aspect of culture of allowing to fail or allowing to operate, as I call it, we made that safety net cross-functional, right? So not only, hey, once we have cross-functional teams, it's not just that I back up the people on my team, I have to back up the cross-functional team, saying, okay, this cross-functional team fails. That's okay. We are trying something new. Let's go ahead and do that. So in case of voice of customer, we talked about the product planning cycle. We did a similar thing across the board from product documentation. So getting direct feedback from the customer through the pre-sales team or through customer success managers to our product documentation team. If it was feedback coming on certain aspects of the product, then we made sure that those channels were open with the product management, or in some cases, directly with the engineers as well. We also flipped the script as well. We have a lot of customers now who are early adopters or strategic customers who partner with us on things that are not out in the field yet, that are not production ready yet. And they don't give us feedback on our beta code, on our designs, things like that. Having built that, now we are able to go back to those customers and ask them for feedback and create that cycle of VOC that a lot of folks talk about. In no way are we perfect, and we still have ways to go. But I think it's been a rewarding journey to see that cycle start clicking and accelerating the growth from there. The best thing to see from that aspect is for a PLM or for even for engineers, like we were talking about this even this week, all engineers, they want the same thing. They want to see the product be successful. They want to see their product or the functionality that they develop be deployed at a customer, be delivering value to the customer. So having that cycle and enabling them to see that. And in fact, sometimes we now even bring customers all the way back into our all hands meeting to talk about how a specific functionality or a specific feature help them deliver value to their customers. So then everybody gets more excited about, okay, I see it. I see the vision. What I'm delivering matters. It's getting deployed in customers. It's delivering value to them. It's delivering value to the company. That sense of purpose comes to the fore for every person on the team.
I love that. Bringing customers in, and they love it too. It's one of those win-win situations. They want you to succeed because they know that helps us succeed. There's a lot of aspects of that's really good. As executives, we want to make big changes quick and see results quick. But you talked about constraint by constraint scaling. I love this. You're like taking the contrarian point of view at every possible opportunity. I love it. What does constraint by constraint scaling mean?
Yeah, my thought process there was I want to be able to solve one problem either for my customers or for my team every single day. I was hearing a podcast the other day. I think it was the CEO or CTO of Anthropic, and he talked about 10 problems per day. So I still have some scaling to do there, but as of right now, it should be a problem that I can solve in a fashion that becomes repeatable in its implementation. The solution becomes repeatable in its implementation. Now, even though I'm solving one problem a day, doesn't mean it doesn't take me a long time to solve that. For example, a problem that I solved today, I might have been working on that for 6 months, but the solution got implemented today. The problem that I solved yesterday might have been a 2 hour problem that I solved yesterday. So taking that approach of one problem at a time, one constraint at a time, that's how I've seen that it's always a look back when you see 5 years back or even 1 year back and oh, we doubled our customer base or we 5x our revenue in the last 5 years or 10x our revenue bookings in the last 5 years. When I look back, it's like all those small things that each person does on a daily basis to remove the one constraint at a time, whether it's in a negotiation with a customer or it's a problem a customer is facing, problem multiple customers are facing, product issue, a product documentation issue, whatever the case may be, removing one constraint at a time. And that kind of allows for exponential growth over time.
It breaks it down too. Then nothing
Yeah,
becomes like this enormous project that then we procrastinate on, or we got to pull cross-functional teams together to solve. Just take it a little bit at a time.
yeah, yeah.
It's really,
I have this, I forget who said this. I think it might have been Bill Gates who said it, that we overestimate what we can do in 1 year and underestimate what we can do in a decade. And I think that kind of has stuck with me to say, okay, let me see what I can do on a daily basis. When we look back a decade, then we'll see, okay, we have made a tremendous growth progress.
I feel like we need a whole series to cover all that we need to cover here, but we've already covered so much territory that I say this a lot on the podcast, but as humans, we can only take in and retain about 2 or 3 things max at a time. If there was one main takeaway that you wanted the other C-suite executives they're going to be taking in this conversation to take away from our conversation, what would that one most important thing be?
I would say from my experience over the last 20 plus years, the system design aspect of
Ooh.
making sure there's alignment between product and the team structure and the org structure, that system design aspect is the most important thing any executive can focus on. It also makes that problem, as well as when you start looking at it from a system design perspective, it makes it easy for you to break it down into those smaller constraints that then you can attack on a daily basis. That's probably the biggest thing, the system design.
I love it. The mission of the podcast is to bring different C-suite perspectives together from all over the industry, all over the world, different insights, different experiences. But if we can share with each other, then I liken it right to the rising tide that lifts all boats. And you were an amazing part of that rising tide today, Abhijeet. I just want to say thank you for coming onto the podcast today.
Thanks, Steve, for having me. I appreciate it.